All right. Last week we would start talking about conditional statements. They have the if and the then statements. The if part we call it the hypotheses. The then part we call it the conclusion. So let me take a look. I have conditional statements, and I'm mentioning conditional statements because I see that instructions say write the converse of each conditional statement. So let me identify my if and my then. I see my if and my then. I remembered last week I said the if part, that's what we call hypotheses. The then part is what we call conclusion. Now, for the homework for today, we're going to have to write the converse. Now, the converse on the conditional statement, what it is that the hypothesis and the conclusion, they switch places. The hypothesis becomes the conclusion, and the conclusion becomes the hypothesis. So looking at this example, the way I will write the converse will be if fish do not swim, comma, then elephants fly. Once again, identify the hypothesis and conclusion and switch places. The hypothesis becomes the conclusion, and the conclusion becomes the hypothesis. Make sure you keep it all with the same wording. Notice how I have on the new hypothesis, on my answered, I have fish do not swim. Don't change it to fish don't swim, right? Leave it with the same wording. I wrote do not, so leave it as do not. Okay, let's take a look at question number 2. First of all, let's identify our if and a then. I see if you tell the truth, then you do not have to remember anything. On a conditional statement to begin with, the if part, that was what we call hypotheses, and the then part is what we call conclusion. Now, for my converse, hypothesis and conclusion switch places. So the way I will write this will be if you do not have to remember anything, comma, then for space purposes, let me continue at the bottom. Then you tell the truth. Once again, keep it with the same wording. Make sure hypothesis becomes the conclusion and the conclusion becomes the hypothesis. On both examples, one thing I want to emphasize as well, do notice that my first letter, so the I on if, it's a capital letter. So make sure it's a sentence. Make sure you start with a capital letter. As soon as I finish the if part, I notice how I have a comma. As soon as you finish the if part, you have a comma. Then also notice that at the end of my sentence, on both cases, at the end of my sentence, I have a period. Don't forget the period to finish the sentence. All right, let's take a look at number 3 now. Let me identify my if and my then part to begin with. If it does not include the freedom to make mistakes, then freedom is not worth having. The if part, it happens to be the hypothesis. The then part is the conclusion. Now, for the converse, the if and the then are going to switch places. I mean, the hypothesis and conclusion are going to switch places. So the hypothesis becomes the conclusion, and the conclusion becomes the hypothesis. The way I will write this will be if, once again, make sure you start with a capital letter, if freedom is not worth having, make sure you keep it with the same wording, comma, then it does not does not include the freedom to make mistakes. Notice how the hypotheses became the conclusion and the conclusion became the hypotheses. That's what a converse is. Keep it with the same wording. Don't forget the period at the end of your sentence. Let's take a look at question number 4. Let me identify the if and the then parts. So if it is raining, so that's my hypothesis, then Sam and Sarah will not go to the football game. That's the conclusion. Now, because I'm asking for this homework, I'm asking for the converse. That's where the hypothesis and conclusion switch places. So I'm going to write if Sam and Sarah will not go to the game, will not go to the football game, keep it the same wording, comma, then it is raining. And once again, let me emphasize, don't forget the period at the end. So converse, when I give you guys a converse, I'm just asking for the converse is when the hypothesis and conclusion switch places.